Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. I would like to put this in a bit wider perspective. That's why the title of my presentation is "Where Are We Heading?" Next slide, please. Next one. Well, we can see this graph. Yeah, this is basically where we were heading, you should say. This is the global market forecast for aviation from Airbus, where we were always on the path in the upward direction, exponential growth still 4 to 5% per year, meaning doubling every 15 years. Nowadays, we have a slight problem. Next, please. Next one as well. Yeah, we're going down this year. Estimates are ranging between 40, maybe 50%. But my expectation is once there is a vaccine or a medicine, we will be very short-lived in our memories and we'll get back to the original growth path. Next, please. Within a matter of years, you will see that we go back there. Well, is there a solution for that? Well, actually, this gentleman has already designed the solution. This was Louis Charles Briquet. Next, please. He was not a very efficient aviator in the beginning of his career, but if we see in the next slide, he became a much more efficient aviator, and he started a large aircraft factory later on. But one of his heritages is a formula. So those of you who don't like formulas, close your eyes and ears now, but this is the formula. And here he has given more or less the directions where we need to go. You can recognize a couple of things: the specific fuel consumption. This is all about more efficient engines. The next one is the lift to drag ratio. This is more about better aerodynamics. And the last one, which you can see in there, is the weight. And the weight is extremely important, and that's why I want to focus a little bit on this. Why is the weight important? Well, because of what we call the so-called snowball effect. Suppose you have 1 kilo more mass in your aircraft, for whatever reason, 1 kilo more passengers, or 1 kilo too heavy structure. That means you will need to create 1 kilo more lift with your wings. That in itself is not an issue, but it's not for free. We will create more aerodynamic drag. That's the price you pay for more lift. Well, more aerodynamic drag is not an issue either. We just put bigger engines, but give you more thrust and solve that problem. However, more thrust means larger engines, and also more thrust means more fuel. And larger engines and more fuel means more mass. And then the loop starts again, and it starts snowballing out of hand. Next, please. And this is why weight is extremely important in aviation. And that everything that weighs more is almost always a no-go. Next slide, please. In that sense, this graph is very, very interesting. This is a graph from the Sabre project, and this shows us the amount of flights against the distance flown. On the horizontal axis, you see the distance flown, and on the blue line, you see the number of flights, and in the green line, the green area, you'll see the amount of fuel used for that. If you look carefully, you see that 90% of the flights is less than 3,000 kilometers, and they consume roughly 50% of the fuel, aviation fuel worldwide. 10% of the flight is larger than 3,000 kilometers, and that consumes the rest of the fuel. And the really astonishing fact of this graph is that the 1% of the flight that is larger than 8,000 kilometers, the really intercontinental long distance flying, consumes a whopping amount of 20% of the aviation fuel. So somehow we need to change this. And one of the things you need to be aware of that nowadays the workhorse of aviation, the A320neo, the 737 MAX, have ranges of, let's say, 6,000–7,000 kilometers, while they normally fly on average 1,000, 1,500, maybe 2,000 kilometers. So they are way too heavy for an efficient operation. So we maybe want to reconsider designing new aircraft. Next slide shows you an example how you could do this, a design project we did with our students. Basically a large capacity, short range aircraft that could solve things. This is still traditional, but how about electric flight? Will electric flight be the future? Well, you would say this aircraft you can buy, it's now already certified, Pipistrel Alpha Electro, and the next slide shows you another project. Unfortunately, that was cancelled in April this year, but the idea was to make a hybrid electric aircraft, a project from Airbus and Rolls-Royce. But effectively, this is the current status where we are. With an electric aircraft, we can just do the same as Louis Blériot. You see him here in his Blériot 11 aircraft. You could cross the British Channel non-stop, and that's it. Then your battery is dead. Where does this problem come from? Well, that's shown in the next slide. This basically shows you the key issue with batteries. Take some time to explain this. On the horizontal axis of this graph, you see the so-called gravimetric energy density. It tells you how much energy, how many joules are being squeezed into 1 kilo of fuel or 1 kilo of batteries. And on the vertical axis, you see the so-called volumetric energy density, and that shows you how much space you need. In this case, it means further to the right on your graph is better, and further up in the graph is better. So the most furthest you can get is with liquid hydrogen. That would be an ideal fuel. The only downside of hydrogen is that you need enormous amounts of space for that. So the volumetric energy density is not optimal, so to say. If you look at the battery, it's all in the bottom left-hand corner. So this is a very bad energy carrier for aviation. The volumetric energy density is poor, and the gravimetric energy density is poor as well. Next slide. Is there something to be expected? Well, that's interesting to see what's happening over the last years. This is a graph that was presented in a report of the Fraunhofer Institute in 2012. And at the top graph, you see the expected growth in energy density, the gravimetric energy density. And you could see that there was indeed an upward trend expected. The bottom graph shows you the cost. Batteries would get more expensive. And that indeed that happened. You see in the next graph, this is a picture from this year. You see that the energy density of all kinds of lithium chemistries indeed went up. Indeed, there is an upward trend, so batteries do get better. But if you do some analysis, and I did some analysis here, I just plotted these points in the graph and made a trend line in there, you see that the trend line is up. Okay, so we just have to wait for better batteries. Well, let's continue this trend line and see in the next graph. Well, if you want to match the energy density of kerosene, that is the red dotted line, you have to wait until the year 2900 before we're there, if this trend continues. And people say, aren't you a bit too pessimistic here? Well, other people say you have to look a bit wider in the past. So next slide, please. This is a graph that shows you the development of battery energy densities over the last century. And every so many years, you see a new step change. You went from lead acid to nickel cadmium, nickel metal hydrate, and then certain around the 90s, we had the lithium batteries coming. So they're more step change. And you make a curve fit through there, you could say, well, there's even exponential growth, somewhere between 5 and 8%. Well, suppose we're going to make this. I doubt that severely, but suppose we will be able to do this and we will grow somewhere between 5 and 8% exponentially on energy density on a battery. What will happen then? This is what you see here in the next graph. I extrapolated current data with a 5% and an 8% curve. The 8% curve is the optimistic one, the green one, and the purple one is the 5% growth. Even then, if this would become reality, you would see that you need to wait until almost 2070 before batteries could match kerosene. So the conclusion actually is batteries are just too heavy to be a serious player in the field. And on top of that, there's another issue, and that has to do with the specific types of batteries. Here you see a slide from a report from the Rocky Mountains Institute, in which you see a spider plot in which all the relevant aspects of a battery are given. The energy density is there, cost is there, fast charging is there, but also safety is there. And the green background shows you the maximum you can ever achieve with current batteries. And then with the dark green line, you see what specific types of batteries can offer. The NMC, that's still a cobalt-based battery, has a very nice energy density already. But it's not very safe, and it is not a fast charge battery. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you see the lithium iron phosphate and the lithium titanate oxides. Those are safer batteries, but their energy density is lower. So there is no good combination yet, and still the energy density is way too low at the moment. So what do I expect? Next slide. Well, I do expect that there will be electric flight. However, it will not be the next generation of aircraft, and I think it will come via two routes. The first route will be a general aviation route. It will be the solution for general aviation aircraft. There you can make the step to fully electric aircraft, non-emission aircraft, but that will not solve the emissions problem, because the amount of fuel used in general aviation is negligible. The second route might be a route via a hybrid passenger aircraft where you have a little bit of electricity on board combined with still a liquid fuel. To put this a bit in a larger perspective, what can we expect and how does electric flight fit into this? Well, if you just look in all kinds of new developments, you can still see that lighter materials and structures will save us about another 10% in the future. A better aerodynamics with large span wings, you can save probably between 10 and 15%. You can look at ultra high bypass ratio engines, there you can make a big step. Electric aircraft will be a solution for general aviation, but general aviation only. There you could make the step to 100% CO2 reduction. But for the rest, for hybrid electric aircraft, this is the large passenger aircraft, don't expect double-digit changes. Do expect maybe 5%, and even that might already be optimistic. Alternative configurations might give you another 20%. Blended wing body aircraft, there are some gains to be won. Laminar flow aerodynamics give you another couple of percent. Operational things, flying slower will help you, flying lower might help you, and also see control avoidance might help you. We saw that in the previous presentation. Another topic which is every now and then in the media, formation flight, maybe another 2 to 5%. And the rest, the no more detouring, the single European sky, for instance, will give you some 5 to 10%. And then the last one, the rest just has to come from a sustainable aviation fuel. That is just the hard truth. So what do we need to do? Well, there is no silver bullet. There is no simple solution. We need more disruptive research and development. We also need to replace older aircraft faster. That will require investments. We need to look into, for the time being, drop-in alternative fuels to keep it on track. We need to have better flight procedures. The single European sky, already mentioned it. Furthermore, we need to compensate. It's only a limited shelf life thing. This will not do this forever, but for the time being, we have no better. We also need stronger incentives, and we do need legislation to enforce that. And somehow we also need to stop the growth. We cannot continue on this ever-growing path all the way up to doubling every 15 years. So there's a lot of things, and for the time being, batteries are just going to be only the solution for general aviation aircraft, unfortunately.